My name is Jason Mattis, and I'm going to talk today about AI observability and what Kong does to help improve AI observability for corporations. AI observability at a high level is an end-to-end visibility into model usage, consumer habits and spending, data control, and agent tracking in real time. The challenge with this is that a lot of people who have used AI recently don't necessarily take the time to set up observability or tracking for different usage of AI models. The challenge is you can't manage what you can't see. But this management goes beyond logs and traces. You add direction insight into data so that you can take actionable steps to improve the capabilities of your language models, to improve the performance of your developers, and to improve the usage and the sentiment of your customers in the AI space. One of the challenges we see from many people that are trying to use generative AI is the fact that they are trying too hard to recreate the wheel, in essence. A lot of AI-based work is based on APIs, and Kong has been managing API endpoints for well over a decade. So the focus for what we're doing in the AI space isn't anything new for us. It shouldn't be anything new for anybody else, except for maybe some changes on token usage, cost models, or streaming endpoints that take place inside of a very familiar construct. But you don't want to have to worry about all the new and crazy things that happen in artificial intelligence. You just want to be able to observe it and manage it and bring it back into the fold like everything else you do for standard API management. At a high level, I'm going to talk about monitoring, explainability, and diagnostics as the three pillars of AI observability. First, I want to talk about data monitoring. When we talk about data that is sent to a language model, there are a lot of concerns that we have, just like a firewall for standard network traffic, about the data that makes its way into language models that could potentially get used to train or pulled for some other use that you don't necessarily want a corporation to allow. This includes data such as PHI, PII, corporate intellectual property, or maybe just not approved content that you don't want to have any questions sent out from your consumers or your employees out to a language model. Next, we're concerned about explainability. Over time, we're going to start using more models that we create. That means we have to be more concerned about accuracy of our models, the integrity of how those models access data that they use, and whether or not those models have drift over time. We don't want to keep introducing a new bias into the system. How do we explain how efficient our model is running? And how do we determine that it's staying on course from how we trained it? Lastly is diagnostics. In terms of monitoring and managing language models, we should be concerned about latency, about cost, and about usage. As a good example, if we know that there is usage of a certain model over another, maybe we don't need that second model. Or maybe the model that is used too much costs more than models that don't. And we start routing people to different endpoints that balances out our cost, balances out the usage, and allows everyone to have a more performant experience with AI agents and language models. So what does Kong do here? Kong brings, as mentioned before, a decade's worth of knowledge in API management to AI observability. What we essentially do in the Kong realm is take that capability and understanding, and we add the usability of tokens, the connection specifically to different types of endpoints for language models that allows us to do two important things. Those things are increasing dev productivity because developers now see what models are the most performant, or maybe what models are the most available for what they need to use in a specific endpoint, and that increases their productivity. We also increase the productivity of consumers because we can semantically choose which model a customer should go to based on their request. That in turn gives them a more directed response that's appropriate for their need, that helps them to be more performant and reduce costs because I'm not asking multiple questions of different models across the entire spectrum of available models from the user. Also important to there is that I can enforce auditability of my specific uses into different language models or whatever endpoints that an agent may talk to or a consumer may talk to. Let me get back into the back end here and show you a little bit more about what I mean. This is the AI manager inside of Kong Konnect. This gives us a high-level view of all the different language models that are exposed to different users or agents in the background. I'm going to show you this specific tag here about a load balanced model that includes both GPT 3.5 Turbo and GPT 4.0. I can see in here the load balancing mechanism used, whether streaming is enabled, and determine very quickly whether the authentication used is by consumer and user or by the gateway, which in this case is by the gateway. But also importantly, I can see specific analytics related to this specific endpoint, how many times the request had been made, how many tokens were used, and very importantly, how many people have been using this model over the course of the last 30 days. So this visibility is important for me to tell who's made these requests and gives me more understanding of whether or not this model is worthwhile to keep around, or if there's someone who starts using more of these models over time, maybe I should have a conversation with them about using some different model. And here I'll show you a big example of that. So I can see here that Jay Mattis, which is me, has been using this model a fair bit. Let me go back into analytics. I'm going to go to a dashboard specifically tied to AI. So again, everything that we do at Kong has been based on API calls for a while. I can do shared services information about specific data relative to API calls that take place on any service that we have. But I also have a specific AI-based dashboard that does a very similar function and provides more important information for us as end users. So in this case, I can see specific models and providers that were used. I can determine whether status codes are showing success or failure and what those specific failures were. I can show the security issues of the security report based on what the failure codes were. I can also, in the point that we talked about before, show specific cost per consumer and consumer token usage. And we can see here that Jay Mattis, which is me, has spent a lot of money on the specific requests that I made over the course of time. There's a different person that's used even more tokens than I have, but has cost way less than I have. So maybe we should talk a little bit more internally about which models I'm using and whether I should be using something that's a little bit more cost appropriate for us as an organization. One thing to also present here is, especially in the agentic realm, MCP is very much on people's minds. I can now have the ability to track which API endpoints my MCP server is using. In this case, I can tell that my control plane's API endpoint has been called over 60 times in the past 30 days as part of an MCP request. And maybe if I see that there's only one request for control plane detail over that last time, maybe I don't need to add that inside of my MCP anymore. And I can just remove that and make the MCP that much more performant and capable. So what I'm going to do now is transfer into a different platform that shows more real-time data and also show that the data that Kong collects can be used anywhere outside of Kong as well. So in this case, I have an AI Gateway dashboard. And this dashboard shows no data. So I'm going to then switch briefly here to a Kong chatbot. And this chatbot is something that we have created that kind of shows how we can track information in real time. So in this case, I'm using Bedrock. I'm using Bedrock as a provider and a specific model for Claude. I'm going to say hello. And I see a response that has come back from Anthropic Claude. I'm also going to ask a few more questions here. Put on a sanitizer as an example. Phone number is 995. Where's my phone number? So this is showing an additional skill of Kong generally that provides synthetic data to do PII sanitization for an end user. But importantly, what I now see here is the fact that there are requests that have been made against different endpoints. And I can tell who has made these requests and whether or not there were violations that have taken place. So the chances are high that I should talk to Jason about what kind of information he's sending outside of the corporate firewall that we don't want to have managed. And so at a high level here, I'm now going to go back and see a little bit more from a cost perspective, how much these engagements, especially with MCP, cost specific or cost customers. So I'm going to write a specific request here. All right. So I'm going to make this request happen. And we noticed before there wasn't a whole lot of prompts that were used or prompt tokens used, but we can now see from a prompt usage perspective and from a cost perspective, I am now in real time seeing how much cost is being associated to the requests that take place in the MCP. So where I may not have seen this visibility before, I was not able to manage it or see what kind of requests were made or how much they cost. Now I can quickly see that I spent over 31,000 tokens as a request that cost me almost 9 cents to run to get a response back for this specific mermaid diagram. And so the benefit here is that I'm now able to show in real time the activity that's taking place on my specific endpoints. And I can tell again very quickly who is using what information, where, when, which models are being used, and what the cost associated with them is. and I can determine very quickly whether or not there are actions that I need to take against specific users who are potentially doing things that go against what we're doing for data monitoring and such. To do a quick recap, it's important to remember the three main pillars of AI observability: data monitoring, model explainability, and diagnostics. If you can manage to support all three of those pillars in an observability stack, you are very well on your way to creating an environment in Gen AI that allows you as a corporation to feel confident and secure in your ability to allow your developers and your employees to use generative AI to full effect. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any other questions relative to how Kong takes care of AI observability in the Gen AI space, feel free to give us a shout. konghq.com. Thank you.